Virgo, and welcome to the story of I Am, your 2020 mid-year reading from Planet Waves. My name is Eric Francis Coppolino here with some astrology for you. Before I get into that, I just want to acknowledge the challenge of the times that we are in, and say to someone who likes things to make sense that things do not make sense, that nothing that has happened in 2020 in the public realm actually makes sense, and there are good reasons for that. And part of the pain that we are in is seeing so much go on that is so senseless and so counterintuitive and so unnecessary. And I know that you're someone who appreciates when there's a little bit of logic to things, and this is particularly true when we're talking about healthcare, talking about taking care of ourselves, and for all of the chaos that is going on, ostensibly from a medical issue, there's been surprisingly little that has been said about how to be well, how to take care of ourselves. I'm going to offer what I can from a spiritual perspective and from a timing perspective, and focus on the astrology leading into the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn that takes place in your solar sixth house in Aquarius on December 21st, 2020, just in a few months from now. A very exciting aspect for you. Virgo is very well positioned to experience the astrology of our moment in a way that is creative and productive, and not only personally relevant, but also in a way that moves you along, moves your life journey along. And there are very good reasons for this, and some of them go back a few years, and they are associated with Chiron in your in Aries, your eighth house. Chiron, a planet that's very much associated with your sign. Chiron is the healing property of Virgo, and the quest aspect of Chiron comes from Sagittarius, and so they're really mainly the qualities of two signs feeding in to Chiron, and one of them is from your sign. Chiron was not only the pretty much the first surgeon, he was also the person who taught medicine to Asclepius, the god of medicine. So Chiron is kind of the teacher's teacher, kind of a meta healer, learned medicine directly from, I believe, Apollo, and is showing up very dramatically in your charts over these years, going back to 2018. But let's take this astrology back to 2008, when the era that we are in really began with the entry of Pluto into Capricorn. That came with all kinds of mischief and mayhem, in the form of one financial product, residential mortgage-backed securities, a kind of a packaged security product, a kind of a security is really, it's like kind of like a bond in a way, that were based on home mortgages, and all the home mortgages, or most of them anyway, were bad mortgages. And so you had huge institutions like banks and insurance companies having half of their assets held in residential mortgage-backed securities. And when Pluto arrived in Capricorn and kind of burst what was then being called the housing bubble, and created a lot of trouble. And made your troubles melt like bubbles, I guess this is a set of heroin. And the heroin of residential mortgage-backed securities blew the economy sky high. And now, at the end of Pluto in Capricorn, we're seeing the cumulative damage done by people entrusted with power in society, but not using that power in any kind of an honest or judicious way. And what has happened, in a sense, is that society has been hollowed out. That the institutions that we rest upon have been hollowed out. The good news for you is that the way this has been working in your chart is actually pretty much as positive as it gets among all the different ways that Pluto and Capricorn could influence something. I am doing my best to see the bright side of this, but there is a very positive element of it for you, which is that you have Capricorn in the fifth house. And I've talked about this a number of times, and what I find is it just helps to keep explaining things till the idea comes across. And the idea of having Capricorn on the fifth house is very central to the whole concept of Virgo. So in the solar chart is a thing that, if you imagine this whole graphic, but take all the planets out and just leave the signs in. And they pretty much stay there, and they represent the ways in which the departments of life are situated around the wheel for Virgo or Virgo rising. And every time you turn the wheel, let's pretend it was Libra rising, everything changes. So, for example, for Libra rising, there's Aries on the 7th and Aquarius on the 5th, and for Virgo rising, there's Pisces on the 7th, relationship house, and Capricorn on the 5th. Two completely different realities, almost unrelated. There, of course, are going to be some parallels, but it's a whole other world, and that's why the sun signs are so powerful, and the rising signs are so powerful. When you take the whole wheel into account, and not just the miniature description of what one sign is about, and this is central to my whole theory of astrology, and why my horoscopes are different is because I'm able to factor the entire wheel in. And by the way, another writer who did this very well was Patrick Walker, and another one was Linda Goodman. So when astrologers are good at the sun signs, it's because they know how to read the entire wheel. And Patrick made charts that looked a lot like this. I did not know this. I thought I sort of invented the idea of just filling in a blank wheel for the sun signs. This is exactly how he worked, and he liked to write in pencil on yellow pads, kind of like one of my other favorite writers, John Steinbeck. Okay, that said, Capricorn is on the fifth house of Virgo, and the fifth house is the house of doing things that kids like to do, teenagers and children like to do. There's a real element of experimentation and exploration in the fifth house. When children are young, to put Capricorn on the fifth house of a chart is to take this experimental and playful angle of the chart and to connect it with a sign quality that is very much adult-like and institutional and very much about the establishment and the way of doing things. And this makes well-behaved children, because they are not going to be so precocious and so experimental. They're going to identify with the adults. They're going to identify with having responsibilities, and often be the kind of kids who end up taking care of a lot of siblings and doing a lot of the parenting responsibilities, because the child element of who the person is essentially replaced by a little adult on the inside. And so when we talk about Pluto coming through the fifth house for you, then you have been the beneficiary of some force of nature that has basically been demolishing this adult crust around your inner child, and this has been very good news for you. You've changed, you've evolved, your intentions have changed in many ways over these years, and particularly in the past few years, this process has accelerated, and I trust you've become more interested in the needs and the desires of the little kid who you are. This leads us into the central topic of our discussion. We're going to come back to Capricorn, but the central topic of our discussion is Mars retrograde in the 8th house in Aries. Here's why that placement is equally interesting as having Capricorn on the 5th. The 8th house is a house associated with another element of relating in sexuality, but the kind that winds up in contracts such as marriage contracts, wills, and trusts. It's about the transfer of money, and it is about the transfer of money in the context of relationships, and in the process of transferring money in the context of relationships, people tend to get lost. I don't. When I was trained in early gender studies in high school, the concept of civil death was a very important concept that was used as a rationale for feminism and as a way to describe the way in which women in particular get subsumed into a marriage and then essentially become property of another person. And this is pushed way too far. Even into the 19th century, you can find examples of classified ads in Ireland. I don't know where else you can find them, probably other places as well, but if it's in Ireland, certainly other places in Europe, and then who knows about Asia, wherein one would put one's wife up for sale, put a classified ad and say like upkeep needed or some. There was some expression. There was some expression that was used, and people reading the ad would know what it meant, and you could essentially buy someone's wife from them. Some crazy shit. Here's how that manifests in the Virgo chart, and the astrology is very much going at a countercurrent to this. Check this out. Aries, wherever Aries exists in a chart, is where a person will seek themselves. So I have Aries in the 11th. I do a lot of my finding myself among my circle of friends in a kind of a small public. Somebody might have Aries in the 5th house, Sagittarius rising person have Aries in the 5th house, and be obsessed with finding themselves through art or through adventure or through sports. Leos have Aries in the 9th house, and that is a personal quest for finding oneself through finding oneself through a kind of a quest of spiritual discovery, and the idea of God for Leo and Leo rising people is very much morphed with the concept of self-actualization. There's a lot of ways you can take this. At least 12 ways you can take this. When you take Aries and put it the sign of self-seeking, of self-discovery, of self-actualization, and you put it in this house of investing in another person, oh, that's really interesting. It means that you're likely to seek yourself through a certain form of committed relationship of a kind where it's easy to get in and difficult to get out. That is marriage, and so this sets up a condition in the lives of critters of a Virgo nature, and yes, it can exist in others, but it's very poignant in Virgo, in the Virgo solar chart setup, which is a cycle of getting lost into a relationship for the sake of finding oneself, and then finding oneself in the relationship and realizing that the relationship is not really for you because it does not really accommodate who you are, and then you extract yourself from the relationship and you find yourself again, and then now you're a new person, and then you go, then as a new person in this next developmental stage, you do the same process over again, get lost in the relationship, submit yourself to this kind of alchemical union or alchemical marriage, and then you find yourself again in that context. So now let's take this up to the current moment. For the first time since the 1970s, Chiron is back in Aries, and what Chiron in Aries is doing is kind of like hyper intensifying the self concept of self, and making it very difficult to enter a situation and get lost, because the self-awareness piece of Aries is freaking jacked up by Chiron in Aries, because Chiron is this focal point of hyper awareness, this very intense focal point of awareness. And so it makes it possible to not only wake up in relationships, but to stay awake in the process of getting into relationships. And additionally, many, I think, Virgo and Virgo rising people who are in relationships are also waking up to the kind of having one of these bigger experiences than usual of waking up inside the relationship and evaluating whether this really is reflective of who you actually are. And so, in a way, this cycle is being shifted or broken by the presence of Chiron in Aries, because it is focusing so much self-awareness. This is aided and abetted by another factor that is currently in. Let's pick a gray Sharpie. I bet it's pretty sharp because I don't use it very often. Another factor that is in early Aries called Salacia, which we'll have an article about Salacia on the resources page. So a little bitty planet out there, and it's a 272-year orbit, and it's a kind of a morph between a Pluto-like planet, a Centaur, and kind of an Eris-like planet. So it's not a normal trans-Neptunian object. It's a very unusual categorization. I forget exactly what it's called. It may be considered a scattered disk object. That's right. So it's about sexual awakening, and it's about the process of sexual maturity. It's a fairly recent discovery, and it is only fairly recently entered Aries, 2017. And over 18 and 19, or 19 and 20, also very recently, there was a conjunction of Chiron and Salacia, I believe 19 and 20. And so this is a time in your life of self-actualization going at full strength in the context of relationship, and that having as one of its necessary components a component of sexual awareness and sexual awakening, a thing that would help a great many people. It's just that there's not much said, done, and known about what this is, and there's very few philosophies that focus this topic in a way that doesn't get moralistic or judgmental in some way, or kind of miss the point entirely. A Virgo author named Betty Dodson was very good at teaching the concept of self-actualization through a sexual awakening framework. And I suggested everyone at least check out her first book, Sex for One, and see what she was thinking and doing. Notably, much of her best work happened the last time that Chiron was in Aries. And by the way, she is Virgo sun, Virgo rising, and so she has 8th house Virgo, and actually, I mean, I've taught her chart at every conference, but it didn't occur to me to think of this placement in the context of her chart. When Chiron was moving through her 8th house, she was talking about this thing of like awakening right at the place that you're in, and learning how to show up for yourself in your body, in the point and time and space and growth where you're at. Okay, so this is a long-term transit, Chiron, and Chiron is going to be in Aries for another about 6.5 years, a solid 5 years, and then about a year or so of transitioning into Taurus for the Chiron return of Chiron. And Salacia is going to be in Aries for, I think, at last time I checked, that was about another 20 years. So this is much, much larger than your sexuality, but it may be that your sexual consciousness leads the way. It may be that it follows. It may be that there's some other factor that is going to be involved in this radical self-awakening that is, it's almost like a full-strength cosmic teaching where you learn and discover who you are and awaken right in the middle of your life, and then you have to evaluate whether you belong where you are and whether where you are is someplace that's subject to change in some way. That would be nice if it was, and often you're the one who has to change in some way, drive progress, despite the fact that somebody else might not be interested in doing that. And I would strongly encourage you not to wait for others to grow or change or wake up. Look at the trajectory of the relationship. Ask yourself how much growing and changing and waking up the person has done. Do not be especially generous. You want real examples of growth, change, and progress. And if that growth, change, and progress has been consistent and dependable, and if there's good communication, and if your personal awakenings have been honored and validated, okay, maybe now we've got something. But don't hold your breath. You have important business to take care of. Your cosmic picture, which is a version of your inner psychic picture, is embracing you right now, and it is saying that you must be the person that you are, and your relationship contracts under no circumstances can hold you back from being the person who you are. It is just time to wake up and to be yourself, and that means being an autonomous person. Financially, this is crucial. The combination of sex and money creates a lot of prisoners. I've done way too many divorces in the course of my astrology journey. In a certain way, I've kind of supported myself on women getting divorced. Never intended to do that, and but still they keep coming in, and the financial elements of marriage are. Somebody ought to write a book about it. So you need your own money. You need your own income. You need your own property. You need your own bank account. Straightforward. You must have your own bank account. And that is an essential piece of personhood, right? This is what we're talking about. Okay, now let's tie this all together with the presence of Mars coming through your 8th house in reverse. I have been describing this Mars retrograde, here's where it happens, from late, almost in Taurus, very late Aries, back to 15 degrees of Aries. So it's going to be conjunct Eris again, and then square all these planets. This is a big deal. As a kind of soul retrieval process. I know there's people who have shingle hanging outside their house saying that they do soul retrieval. I'm not talking about that in the literal sense of soul retrieval, but more in the figurative sense of recovering something about yourself that's deeply hidden, was forgotten, was lost in some way, or most significantly, that got lost in a series of relationships. So one of the common things that happens with people in relationships, and I think it mostly happens with women. I noticed it because it happened with me a lot of times, and I started to have to figure out ways to have it not happen. I don't. Well, there are certain kinds of men for whom this happens, and they tend to be the very men with an evolved feminine side or a present feminine side. Less so your dudes type of guys who are inherently independent of women and who may feel that women are a bit beneath them. More of the kinds of guys who feel like women are a bit of their equals. So here's the phenomenon. You live your life a certain way, you do your thing a certain way, and you're not in a relationship, and you do these things, whatever it might be, go to yoga class, sketch, play an instrument, have a certain relationship with your cat. And then when you get in a relationship, all those things change. There's certainly time consumption element in relationships. There is a space and bandwidth issue in relationships, particularly if they're live-in relationships. And there is a kind of an alchemical fusion, and then parts of you are lost. Elements of your personhood can be lost, and people can sacrifice careers to relationships and education to relationships, and then the resulting children can be a factor that has a similar knock-on effect, and so forth. And the retrograde of Mars in Aries is a kind of a reclaiming of all that you have left behind in your relationships, claiming back all the elements of personhood that you've lost to what anything. Actually, it's not merely just relationships. It can be any situation involving the eighth house, anything involving death, dowry, and the substance of the bride. Anything involving, say, for example, any compromise of your ethics that you've made because you were invested in something or a partner in a business. This happens all the time. It can include. I was talking to a client who's a kind of a strategic planner at a major bank. I mean, get this, and neither she nor any of her colleagues are allowed to write about anything on the internet. Okay, if she wants to start a blog about butterflies, no, cannot do it without some corporate permission that is unlikely to happen. And so there's another kind of a parallel example of the ways in which investing yourself in a kind of a contractual marital situation cause a loss of your being. And there are plenty of people who are saying, take this job and shove it. There are plenty of people who are recognizing that their personal autonomy and their integrity, which are very similar, is worth far more to them than potentially some high-priced job. And one of the things that, for example, this writing ban makes it difficult to do is to change careers, because one of the easy ways to change careers, if you happen to be a snappy writer with something to say, is you start a blog, and it still can happen. You start a podcast, you start something that has a public face. You're not like tinkering with chemicals in the lab and you come up with a new polymer or something like that, but through a public presentation, not allowed. So Mars retrograde is there's something of a feeling of self-discovery to this Mars retrograde, and it is like it's discovering all that you have, essentially accounting for, a good word to use for the eighth house, accounting for all you have given up through the context of any form of incorporating yourself into another person or another life in any way. Okay, and there is almost the sensation of clawing it back, because Mars doesn't like to take shit. And though Mars is not especially comfortable being retrograde, there's something here wherein Mars knows that this is an essential experience to collecting all of the things that need to be put together into one place to have a fully formed whole person playing with a full deck with all of your natural rights and your ability and your own name and your own presence in the world and your own mission and your own purpose and all of these things. And at the same time, there is also, I think, perhaps, maybe I'm overly optimistic here, not usually one of my problems, but maybe this time, of getting yourself to a place where you are fully standing on your own, and the losing yourself part of the losing finding process in relationships is no longer a thing. It's a non-starter. There's no more losing yourself. That you will now love and embrace people only as an autonomous, fully integrated human being. That'd be a good idea. Not everyone likes that. It's a lot of responsibility, and there are to acknowledge those who are not made for this. There are people who are not made for it. There are certain people for whom certain kinds of relationships where they're where they're in a sense part of the household corporation, playing a role in the household corporation, are much happier that way. There are people who are happier if their partner makes a lot of money, and they don't, they just don't have a mind for it, and they're happy to have what they have and be in the relationship, and it works that way. If that's the case for you, then what we're talking about here is talking about finding yourself in the context of relationship and holding your autonomy in the context of relationship. This probably does not include very much in the way of sexual freedom, but you never know whether it does, and it just might. The important thing, given the fact that you have Neptune moving through your seventh house, is that your honesty is very important, and one of the ways that situations inappropriate to who a person is are sustained and upheld is through a veil of dishonesty, and Neptune is cautioning against that. Sooner or later, at some point, this is going to explode, and you don't really want that happening. And I think there are, in my long and storied career of consulting people exiting their marriages, the question can seem to be, should I have a kind of a explosion now or have an explosion later, and maybe the explosion later won't happen, whereas if I explain that I've been having an affair with my trainer or something like this, that for sure things are going to blow sky high. But if I don't say something, well, maybe they're not going to blow sky high. If you're in that situation, you might read a book called Radical Honesty by Brad Blanton. Sadly, his number no longer works in my cell phone. I absolutely love talking to Brad Blanton. I always learn something. But his book is there, and not any of the additional books, Practicing Radical Honesty Workshop, Radical Honesty for Cats and Dogs. The original Radical Honesty by Brad Blanton came out sometime, I reckon, probably in the late 1980s. And this is one of those books that nobody wanted to publish. And it's now one of those very quiet bestsellers. But the the you will see why the topic of radical honesty is so potentially controversial. But on the other hand, this is one of the very best self-actualization instruction guides, because it talks about the ways in which self-actualization is limited primarily by one thing, and that one thing being not being real with people. And so this is a very good time in your life to practice the truth that honesty is the best policy. And there are particularly in the sexual realm, being honest is the parachute on your back in case some fucker decides to push you out of the airplane. You're wearing a parachute. If you are honest with people and honest with your friends and honest with whatever public that you have, you're scandal-proof. Basically, people can always lie, but if the truth about you is known already, then it's harder to make up a counter-narrative that sounds ridiculous. Just saying. Speaking from experience. Okay, so let's see what else is going on here. Let's pay a bit of homage to the ninth house, since I've paid attention to the ninth house in many of the other readings. Leo got a nice discussion about the ninth house. If you have access to the Leo reading, you might find something in there, because there's something a little bit similar. Leo has Aries on the ninth. You have Taurus on the ninth, and the beauty of the beauty of Taurus on the ninth, just as a thing, right? As a thing that you could write about in a sun sign book, and that I should dust off my Linda Goodman books and see the way she talks about the spiritual life of Virgo, is that you like to be consistent and stable in your beliefs. And that spirituality has to have two things. It's kind of very Jewish in a way. It has to have an element of tradition, and it has to have an element of practicality. But the beauty of Jewish tradition, a rabbi's rabbi once explained this to me, is that the reason why Jews survived the diaspora and the Holocaust and Egypt and every other fucking bad thing that could possibly happen on this planet is because their tradition is adaptable. Their tradition is adaptable to every culture. It's adaptable to every particular situation. It is just adaptable. And Uranus on the traversing Taurus on the ninth house is saying, okay, enough tradition of philosophy. The ninth also is your personal philosophy of life. And you may decide now with Uranus, the inventor, the disruptor, the revolutionary, the rebel, that whatever tradition you've had going back many years, okay, let's change that. I don't know if there's a thing with Virgo Marxists. I have a little thing in my life with Virgo Marxists. This is a concept that is, first of all, very instructional about what we've got going on now. I'm not personally a Marxist, but I've learned a lot from Marxists, mainly a critique of capitalism, and you might find some wisdom in a critique of our economic system while that economic system is in the middle of a massive failure. Well, you're going to need to reinvent a new philosophy on life and a new economic theory so that you can continue to put food on the table for yourself, your family, and your cats and dogs. And so a revolution in your philosophy of life is being made welcome and in some ways inevitable by the journey, 5 more years of Uranus through Taurus, your ninth house. Much else going on. 2 more 12-sign readings coming this year. I'm going to finish the respect readings in case you purchase those. I've only done 3 of them, but my project for September is to do the respect readings, to finish those, and then toward the end of the year to do a new set of 2021 readings. The respect readings are written readings that are 2021 plus. I go all the way out into 2024 with those because I'm accounting for Pluto in Aquarius, which is going to be a big deal for you because you are going to be very busy in 2021 and 2022 because Jupiter and Saturn are entering your 6th house. You will not be wanting for things to do. You will not be wanting for collaborators. But in order to, well, let's just end on this note so that it's memorable. In order for you to be able to work with collaborators and stand up to your collaborators and maintain your independence among the group of collaborators, you're very much a collaboration-oriented person. You must be individuated and well individuated and not get yourself into a lot of mini compromise situations as might have been possible in years past. This is not going to work for you now. You must be the person who you are all the time with every person that you're with. You must be the same person with Donald Trump as you are with your mother, as you are if you met Lady Gaga or whoever the next big thing is, as if you met your any one of your heroes, and with your best friend and with your cat. You must be one person consistently. That is a crucial, irrevocable element of self-actualization. And that's what I have to say to you today. Please check your rising sign. Share this with a friend if you think that they'll benefit from it. And please send them back to me if you do. But I want to make sure that this work gets to where it needs to be. So if a partner or housemate or your mom or somebody thinks that they might benefit, please do let them in on our little not so secret. Okay. Great working with you. Lots of love to you, and bye for now.